Hey everyone, and welcome back to That Was History. I've been looking into some interesting battles and events that have occurred in our history lately, and I came across a battle I've never heard before. It's like nothing I've ever seen in regards to typical battles. Be sure to stick around. When we come back, we will have 7 great historical events to discuss with you, and Jeremy's going to tell you a little bit about this strange battle that I've been talking about.
Today, as we know it, Stonehenge is just a normal sight to see when you're traveling abroad, or for those of you in our audience who are actually from the UK, maybe it's when you just take a day out to go see it. Well, the mysteries that lay beneath the surface of Stonehenge are far more than what we have time to expound upon today. We will, however, tell you about an interesting event that took place back here on June 1st of 1985. The entire Stonehenge would be shut down in the coming days to this date. 500 hippie travelers would collide with police officers on the way to the ancient circle of Stonehenge in Wiltshire for an illegal festival. The roadblock was set up a whole 7 miles from the actual site of Stonehenge to make sure that no one got in. This day is quite often remembered as the Battle of the Beanfield and was the first major test of an English heritage ban on midsummer festivals at Stonehenge. I mean, for those of you who are in our audience from the United States, this would be like banning a group from having a festival on the mall in Washington, D.C. Oh, and before I forget, a fun fact that you may not know about Stonehenge is that scientists have found ancient remains dating all the way back to 3000 BC, and they think that they were of important people of that time period. And also, the way that you see Stonehenge today is not how they believe it looked thousands of years ago in its beginning.
We all live in a world with law-abiding citizens and those who feel that the law does not directly apply to them. I don't know where they get this mindset, but it happens. Needless to say, because of these criminal and radical minds, we need protection. This is where the government comes into play. In most countries, there's a police and military force that is dispatched to deal with potential threats and help handle situations like the very recent Boston bombings. But how far is too far? This is the question that citizens in the American colonies were asking on June 2nd of 1774. On this day, the Quartering Act was reinstated that allowed British soldiers to enter people's homes, and it quickly became part of the intolerable acts in the eyes of the colonists. The idea was that private homes were supposed to be available for troops to stay in if need be, but surely there was more to it than meets the eye. I bet this act was abused quite frequently for the purpose of spying and intelligence prior to the beginning of the Revolutionary War. What do you think? Do you agree? Let's start a discussion in the comments section down below and let us know what your thoughts are.
So when I say the name Gideon, does anything come to mind? Perhaps you've heard of the Gideons, but how about the actual person who changed the way of the criminal justice system? When you're convicted of some crime, whether it be a small misdemeanor or something larger, you are entitled to a lawyer whether you can afford one or not. Did you know, though, that at one point you were not even entitled to a lawyer no matter what? It was Clarence Gideon's arrest for breaking into a pool room that changed everything. In his case against Wainwright, the Supreme Court ruled that a fair trial cannot be realized if the poor man charged with the crime has to face his accusers without a lawyer present to assist him in his decisions. So if it ever comes down to it and you do get arrested for whatever type of act that you commit, big or small, be thankful that you can have a lawyer to represent your case. You never know, maybe you weren't in the wrong, maybe you can't afford a lawyer. But now thanks to Clarence Gideon, you have a lawyer who can be present to get you out of whatever mess it might be that you're in.
Many of you probably remember the terrible events that occurred in Tiananmen Square in 1989. If not, this was the forceful disbanding of protesters that had been occupying the square since April of that year. These activists called for government accountability, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and the restoration of workers' control over industry. At one point, roughly 1 million people were assembled in the square. The Chinese government dispatched soldiers and armored vehicles such as tanks to force the protesters out in June. On June 4th of 1989, what has become known as the Tiananmen Square massacre occurred. Soldiers with assault rifles and tanks killed and injured thousands of unarmed civilians trying to block the military's advance into the square. According to CNN, official Chinese government figures put the number of dead at 241 and 7,000 injured. However, rights groups say that the number of dead were likely in the thousands. Due to these events, many protesters were arrested and some of them are still in jail to this day. The United States frequently urges China to consider releasing these prisoners, but so far they have had no such luck. China continues to keep their protesters locked up and continue to say that the United States' accusations against China's government are baseless and will not be considered. Sadly, these people are still in jail and might be for the rest of their lives.
Flight is one of those things that man has been trying to better over the centuries. It is one of the greatest adventures and accomplishments to have the first successful flight in anything, or even if you're not the first, to have the longest flight out there. If you think about it now in the present, you have helicopters, planes, hot air balloons. Well, way back in the day, man was just discovering flight and how all the scientific theories played a role in making it work. Well, let's take the hot air balloon for example. On June 5th of 1783, brothers Jacques and Joseph Montgolfier would publicly display their 10-minute flight using a hot air balloon over Annonay, France. I mean, now it doesn't seem like that would be such a big accomplishment, but back then, scientists and everyone were still discovering modern conveniences that we have today when it comes to flying.
There were many huge events that occurred during World War II. One such event occurred on June 6th of 1944 and was directed by Dwight D. Eisenhower. Currently the commander of Allied Expeditionary Forces, he gave the go-ahead for a massive invasion of Europe called Operation Overlord, which included British, Canadian, and American forces. There were a total of 1 million Allied troops that landed on the beaches of Normandy in northern France in an event that became known as D-Day. Having thoroughly confused Hitler with the fake Operation Fortitude South that stated that America's intentions were to attack at the Strait of Dover, the Allies were able to achieve a great deal of success with their true intentions. It would be almost another year before the war in Europe would come to an end, but this was definitely a great success in the Allies' favor.
Well, now that was quite interesting, but you know what else is interesting? Idols. We all have them, I'm sure of it. I mean, there has to be someone famous out there that you look up to and want to model after, or maybe you're just jealous of their lifestyle. Well, wouldn't it be cool to get a glimpse into their lives as like a fly on the wall and see how they live? I think it would be pretty cool. I'm sure you have all heard of the famous Elvis Presley and know that he was loved and adored by his fans. Well, not even 5 years after his death, they would open his mansion Graceland on June 7th of 1982 to the public. Now everyone could have a look at what his life was and imagine how it was to live in such an enormous estate. I mean, who wouldn't want to live in such a mansion? How cool would that be?
Well, that's a wrap, guys. Did you learn anything new? Be sure to let us know in the comments section down below. I did want to take this time to thank subscriber Lasse Malton for sending us this little tidbit of information. The first week in June is unofficially Scandinavia Week, and here's why. Denmark's National Day is June 5th, Sweden's National Day is June 6th, and June 7th celebrates the dissolving of the union between Sweden and Norway, allowing Norway to be independent. So thanks once again to Lasse Malton for the great information, and we hope to see you guys again next Friday.
If you've been with us thus far, I'm sure you've seen our skit, Don't Change My Coke, or also the flip-flop of orientation in one of the intros. If you like seeing this stuff, please follow our link to Facebook and Twitter, and you can leave us a comment there, and you can see it in our episodes each week. If you're not a subscriber, please click off to the right, and you can get the weekly update.